Now that we've discussed system hacking in the last chapter, this chapter focuses on yet another way to hack into computer systems and networks, and that's through the use of malware. Now, malware actually is one of the most common ways to attack a system or network, because if you think about it, you've got to get attack tools onto the box, you've got to be able to control the box, get privileges on it, and escalate those privileges, as we discussed in the last chapter. Malware is one venue for that, one way to get entry into the operating systems, the applications, and even the network devices sometimes. Now, we think of malware basically in terms of viruses, but there's actually a pretty exacting breakdown and definition of what malware really is. We have Trojans, viruses, and worms, obviously, and there's some other forms out there as well. And there's also malicious scripts and web-based applets, rogue JavaScripts, for example, or ActiveX controls that have been used for malicious purposes. So you can basically classify anything that's malware that performs undesired actions on the system or causes intentional harm. So we're going to talk about some of these different types of malware throughout this chapter. We're going to cover Trojans, viruses, and talk about the other types of malicious applications out there, malicious scripts and so forth, that can allow a hacker to gain control of a system. Now, one of the biggest problems that hackers have is how do we get the malware on the system in the first place? How do we get a Trojan on the system? Well, there's a wide variety of ways. And you'll find that you could use every trick in your bag of tricks to get malware on a system. You could trick unsuspecting users, and that's probably the major way it happens. You could also embed it in other software, such as what we do with Trojans, download it to the client, to the PC, or whatever without the user's knowledge, and of course infected media like infected CDs and USB sticks. So there's several different ways to get it on there. And really, unless you've got physical access, you're going to have to use one of these methods. You're basically going to have to trick the user into doing it or get them to download something from the internet, from a website or something. Now, hackers use malware for all kinds of purposes. Of course, we use them to invade systems. We may want to steal or alter data like financial data, passwords, and so forth, get these credentials like passwords, or even use malware to conduct attacks on other systems. That's really what botnets and zombies are about, is attacking other systems, typically using remote control software or malware from an attacker. Now, you may think that programming a virus or writing a piece of malware or wrapping a Trojan up is a very complicated matter, but it's actually not. Unfortunately, it does not require any in-depth knowledge of programming. There are simple programs, point-and-click GUI programs that you can click Next on, and it will create and configure and wrap malware up for you. So it's actually very easy to do. Now, how do we get malware delivered to a system? I mentioned a couple of different ways, but let me give you some examples. Unsuspecting users, maybe through tricking them into clicking on something, obviously. Phishing attacks. That's a big source of malware. Not only do phishing attacks enable attackers to get credentials by emailing the victim a false link to click on, and then they click on the link and they put in their credentials. They think they're going to a valid site, but they're really not. Hacker collects the credentials, but you can also send malware down through a phishing attack as well. Cross-site scripting attacks, and we'll talk about those a little bit more when we talk about web hacking. There's also some other web-based scripting attacks we could use to get malware on a system. Infected media, obviously, if you get an infected USB stick or CD-ROM or something like that, or can get it on the hard drive through the network, maybe through a shared file or something of that nature, you could get it to a system. Malicious websites, some malicious websites have malware on them, and if you click on the wrong thing or you get a pop-up, and it doesn't matter what you click on the pop-up, if you try to close it, you're going to download malware. We can also get malware to a system by embedding it in innocent-looking but useful programs. That's really what a Trojan is. Now, some different malware attacks that we could look at, some different ways that we could use malware against a system. Keystroke logging, obviously, and I'm not talking about just logging passwords and usernames, although that's a popular use for it. I'm talking about logging entire documents of keystrokes. Screen captures, seeing what a user sees on the screen and taking a snapshot of it without them knowing it, sometimes even taking video of their screen without them knowing it. Email snooping, looking at their emails while they're typing them and before they're sent. Chat captures, if they're chatting or using IM across their network, malware can capture that. Taking over an entire system. obviously getting a system to do what you want it to, taking it over, removing files from it, sending files to it, making it change its configuration, making it create accounts, for example, wiping a disk, or possibly even worse, encrypting a disk so the user can't access it. And we'll talk about ransomware a little bit later, but basically that's what you might do with ransomware, is encrypt a disk and then ransom off the key to decrypt it. Webcam activation is a popular one. People have had instances of their webcams being activated by malware. Now, I mentioned data ransom, and basically ransomware is a way to threaten the user with deletion of data or encryption of the data unless they pay some money. Data erasure and theft, obviously, is something that malware can do, password theft, and using malware to attack other machines. That's what a botnet or a zombie is. And finally, you can use malware to create and propagate a distributed denial of service attack against a machine or an entire network. So those are some of the malware topics we'll talk about over the next few sessions when we talk about Trojans and viruses and so forth. We'll go into these a little bit more in depth then.